My name is Stephany. I am an attorney. I'm a writer, a mother to three little boys and one border collie. And yeah, just living my most authentic life right now. But it wasn't always like that. I spent over 17 years within two narcissistic abusive marriages, and I did not know that I was really in these abusive marriages. And my background is in domestic violence. I won the governor's award for my work with survivors of domestic violence. I spent many years at the prosecutor's office working with victims. And yet here I was in these emotionally and psychologically abusive marriages. But when you look at domestic violence, 20 plus years ago, it was focused on physical violence. So what happens when you're in a relationship and you're like, it doesn't seem right? Something feels off, but you don't have a label or a word for it. You don't know what it is because it happens so slowly. It's like when you put a a crab in a pot of water. I don't know, I'm from Oregon. So a crab in a pot of water and you slowly turn up the heat and boil it. You don't know what is happening until all of a sudden it's this full blown like, what? And so that's kind of where I ended up. I was on the floor in my sister's bathroom, just like crying to God, the divine, like, why me? What did I do wrong? From the outside, I'm very successful. But on the inside, it's like, why is my life falling apart? And I couldn't see past all this pain and suffering that had engulfed my life for so many years. I, you know, two abusive, psychologically abusive husbands. A I lost a house in a house fire. I lost a house in a hurricane. I had a baby born with an extremely rare genetic disorder, and then my second husband's ex-wife died of COVID, and all of a sudden I have six little boys under the age of 14. And it's like all this stuff just kept happening. And then I lost my eyesight. And so I'm sitting there and I felt at the time like the divine was saying, Stephany, you are not seeing your life through the right lens. You need to let go of this victim story and become the hero of your story. Because the thing is, when we're in these narcissistic abusive relationships or toxic relationships of any kind, it's hard to see past being the victim. But until you can let that victim story go, you can't see the lessons. And we'll continue to repeat the patterns until we see the lessons. We'll continue to call these people into our lives until those patterns are broke. And so for me, sitting there on the floor, like, why me? I didn't know I was in these narcissistic abusive marriages. And so what is narcissism, right? What the heck is that? It seems like people are using it a lot. So narcissism is I heard this on a podcast the other day from a doctor. I can't remember her name, but she was explaining narcissism like a cake. There's so many layers to it, and the layers of it, like the ingredients that make up a narcissist, it's that grandiose sense of self-importance, the preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited power or wealth, this excessive need for adoration and admiration. They want to be the center of your attention. They want to be fawned all over. They have a sense of entitlement and a lack of empathy and just a very, very fragile ego. And so, sometimes when people say narcissist, they must be like these really secure people. But really, it's the opposite. They have a fragile ego, very low self-esteem. They hate themselves. They have so many layers of protective self, and they don't even know who they are, but they're very destructive. And it's a disordered personality. And so when you are with someone who has this disorder, your life becomes chaos. chaos, trauma, and drama. And it is so hard to get out of this cycle. Um, and so when you look at narcissistic abuse, there is a cycle very similar to the domestic violence cycle. So there's the idealization phase, the devaluation phase, and then the discard. So the idealization phase is, like any relationship, when you first start dating someone, you want to spend all your time with them, right? You want to get to know them. But with a narcissist, it's like 10x. It's to the extreme. You end up dropping your friends. They don't have any friends, so you don't have to worry about that. But you become like their obsession. And at first, it feels nice because who doesn't want to be put on this pedestal and made to feel good, right? And narcissists, they're charming, they're charismatic, they're beautiful. They can work a room, but when they focus on you, you feel very special. Like, hey, they're giving me their attention. They're making me feel seen and heard.
It's like something you haven't experienced before because that person makes you feel in a lot of ways everything that you ever wanted to feel in your life up until that point, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And you'll hear them say things like, "You are my soulmate. I prayed for you, and here you are. We are meant to be together." And they make it so easy for you to feel comfortable around them because what they are doing is they mirror you. They mirror your values, they mirror your hobbies, they mirror everything about you to the point where you fall in love with you because they become whomever they need to be with you. They become that person.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to
And
that, Stephanie, as you're saying that is I remember a time because one thing you pointed out, which I think a lot of people fall victim to, is the fact that they don't realize how deep they are in the situation until something hits the fan, right? And you
yes,
mentioned a good point where eons ago, it was abuse was physical, right? For
mhm,
the most part, that was at least what was shown in the public. Now we have a greater focus or maybe an equal focus on emotional abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse. The ones that are the scars are hidden for the most part because we don't see these forms of damage until we look ourselves in the mirror and we look and we see that, oh my goodness, I realize that I'm not taking care of myself like I used to because this person has beaten me down. I realize I've gained weight because I'm stressed out. I'm always on edge.
mhm.
I'm always on these in these different ways. And for you, when you share that and you highlight what the abuse can do to you, and when as you're mentioning how we get stuck into it, what's maybe a way that someone can identify and say, okay, I am in an abusive relationship. What am I going to do about it at that point?
Yeah, well, when it's the beginning of the relationship, it's very hard to tell that you're with a narcissist. So I tell people like one of the red flags is if it's too good to be true, it might just be too good to be true, right? Caveat emptor. Um, and so and if things progress really quickly, be aware of that. But my two ex-husbands, they were both alcoholics. Well, they hid it. I had no idea that they were drinking like a fifth of vodka. I didn't know. That wasn't a red flag I could have seen. Um, and so, sometimes it's really confusing because what happens is so you have this idealization period, right? Where it's wonderful, it's perfect, it can last for weeks, months, or a year or two, and until they get you hooked. Because the thing is that nobody can lead a double life for so long. The mask has to come off, and it will come off once they got you hooked. Once they've been They got you engaged. Once you've moved in with them and you've quit working because they're supporting you, once you've given up on a lot of things or left your family and all your friends, and you're just very dependent on them as your friend and your source of companionship and company, and or they get you pregnant, whatever it takes to get you hooked. Then the mask comes off. And when the mask comes off, this is where the devaluation happens. And this is why this phase is called a devaluation. Now, all of a sudden, they're a different person. Everything that they loved and respected and cared about you in the beginning, they no longer do. And this is when the manipulation starts. This is when the gaslighting starts. And for those of you who don't fully understand what gaslighting is, because this is another word that's thrown around a lot, gaslighting is when you manipulate another person into doubting their perceptions, experiences, or understanding of events. It's emotional abuse. In fact, it is a highly calculated form of coercive control. Because again, just like, the cycle of domestic violence, this is all about power and control. So why does a narcissist gaslight you? Well, they gaslight you because it helps them avoid any blame or responsibility. If they can make you doubt your perception of what just happened, then they don't have to take any responsibility for what they just did to you. They will confuse you and twist your words. They will say, they intentionally lie and deceive. And you can have all the evidence you want. My first husband, a covert narcissist, was a tweeter. I'm like, you are cheating. You are having an affair. No, I'm not, as he's living with another woman, right? They live in their delusions. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you have, they will not believe it. And they will deny and deny and deny until they make you question your reality. So some common gaslighting phrases are, you are too sensitive. Or you can't, I'm just speaking my truth. You need to stop being so sensitive so you can hear my truth out. Or you can't take a joke. I'm just being sarcastic. That's not how it happened. You're twisting the words. Or one of my ex-husband's favorites was, you look at the watch and be like, oh yeah, this is why you're acting like a bitch. It's the moon cycle's coming. They turn everything around to where they're the victim and you are just in this utter confusion of what just happened. And so all of that is called cognitive dissonance, where you start to question your reality. And they keep you in this fog and keep you confused because then they can control you. And it is about controlling. And so then what happens, though, is that there's intermittent reinforcement of positive. They're not always horrible. They know they can't be horrible 100% of the time, or no one would ever be with them. So they give you rewards. So they'll go disappear for 3 days, or go pout, or go have a tantrum. They're very much the toddlers. I have a toddler. I know what it's like. They'll go and pout, and while they're off pouting, they won't respond to you. And here you are. What did I do wrong? What just happened? And so the victim goes internal, and this is where it's like, okay, well, who do I need to become now? Who do I need to become to get through the day? Who do I need to become when it's negative? Because I want the positive guy. I want the first guy that I fell in love with. I want him back. So what if I lose 10 pounds? Will it make everything better? What if he wants an open marriage? Okay, so what if I do go along with that? Will I get the first guy back that I fell in love with? And so you have this intermittent reinforcement of the good, the bad, the good, the bad, the good, the bad, and that creates a trauma bond. And a trauma bond is very similar to a drug addiction. So the first time you use a drug, whatever the drug is, you get this really high dopamine rush, right? You're way up here. It feels great. It's amazing. So then you come down, then you use it again. But when you use it again, you don't get that same dopamine release. Every time you use, you get less dopamine. But you keep using because you want that reward. Like you know, the lows are so low, so you wait for that reward to get back up high, even just a little bit. And similar with a trauma bond, it's as if you become addicted to this person and you wait for that reward and you stay because in our mind and in our head we think, wait, how do we get that first love back? How do we get back to the idealization phase where they were wonderful, where they were perfect, where they were everything I wanted and needed? What do I have to do to get that guy back? And so you stay and you put up with it. And this is why when people say, why don't you just leave? Well, what do you say to a drug addict? Why don't you just quit and clean yourself up? Your life will be better. But you don't see that because over time, the narcissist has conditioned and has reprogrammed your subconscious mind to where you live from a different space. You live from a space of reaction, and you've become someone that you weren't. You've lost your true authentic self, and now you're this robot in a sense, waiting for your reward. But the problem is that every time there's that intermittent reinforcement, the negative gets more and the positive, the reward gets less.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's something that I always wanted to let people know. On the outside, it's easy to tell someone, just leave. Stephany is the worst wife in the world, just leave. Terrain's the worst husband in the world, just leave. But what a lot of people don't understand on the outside looking in is, as you mentioned, you've been conditioned over a period of time where you truly believe that this person's life has become more valuable than your own.
Yeah.
And that's
You,
uh, right. And that's how people understand, because people seem to forget that trauma bond is that you see the pain. And for those out there, it's similar to when you're being held hostage and you suffer a Stockholm syndrome, where you begin to bond with your captor, with your kidnapper, with your abuser. And in many times, the narcissist will beat you down to the point where the person that you were before them, you don't even remember who that person is anymore. You can't tap in to that type of energy. Is that the picture that you want to paint for those who are on the outside looking in, trying to understand why people stay in these situations, Stephany?
yeah, absolutely. Because it is, you know, you've been hooked. You know, you're addicted. You're in this addiction cycle. And and we as, you know, the victims, they become our life. What can we do to make them happy? Who do I need to become today? What just happened? I have no idea. And then throw some kids in there. And that even makes it more challenging. Do we break up the family? Do I take the kids and go? How much do the kids know? How much do they don't? And then you have to remember that the narcissist is still conditioning you and conditioning everyone. They are telling you, you try to leave me. No one else is going to love you the way I do. No one's going to treat you the way I do. I mean, when it's good. No one is going to believe you. So think of like a covert narcissist. They're usually pillars in the community. They're respectful people. They're the ones that are in church and volunteering to take the old ladies grocery shopping. You know, they look like a model citizen, and then they come home and they're someone different. And so when they say no one's going to believe you believe that, or you can't get any better, or maybe they financially controlled you. You don't even have control of your bank accounts or the money. You don't even know where the money is because you have to beg and ask for the credit card to go grocery shopping to get food for the family because you're the grocery shopper among everything else that you are. And so there's so many complex layers that you can't just say, why don't you leave? Can't you see it? He's abusive. She's abusive. Um, they're treating you like shit. You need to go. You can't do that. That's how you lose a friendship. What you can do is say to your friend, if there is someone you know and that you love and care about who's in this situation, you can say, I see you. I love you. I'm a safe person. If you ever need to get away for a night or a weekend, my house is safe. I am safe. And I'm here for you. And be that support person. Because once you start preaching, they're gone and they will cut you off.
How were you able to break free from not only one situation, but two with your ex-husbands?
So, getting away, there's usually only two ways out. You are discarded, and it's exactly what it sounds like. What do we discard? We discard trash, right? So, or you find worthiness within yourself and you say, I'm done. I'm sick of this. I can't live like this. And you leave. So, um, and when you're discarded, it's usually for two reasons. One, they've used you up. You've become this robot, and they've conditioned you so well that you're just not fun anymore. This is a game. It's all a game. I was a chess player, I love chess. I love games. I like strategy. This is a game. They fully know what they are doing to you. Don't ever be deceived that they're unaware. No, they know exactly what they are doing to you. Um, so my first husband, so he was a cheater. And again, how many of us do this? We put cheating in one category and abuse in the other category. Well, they're just cheaters. Well, cheating is psychological and emotional abuse. Did you tell them to stop? Did they not? Okay. The sad thing is if I were to call the cops and be like, oh, I just caught my husband cheating and he's psychologically abusing me and he keeps gaslighting me, can you take him and haul him off to jail? The cops would show up and laugh, say, you guys need therapy. God. And they would leave. And so, it's there's not until all of us as a whole society recognize this, then yeah, we have to fight it individually. But going back to yours, he walked out for another woman, left me with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and another married woman. And at the time, I didn't want to be married to him anymore, but I come from a very good, solid family. And he comes from a very good, solid family. And I loved our families. And we had the little kids, and you didn't want to break that up. And all this stuff. And it's like, well, you don't get divorced. I mean, my mom's a minister. I grew up at church. And so it's like, no, you work through these things. But at what point do you say, I've done my best, I'm being psychologically and emotionally abused, I need to go, and not pray enough that they will get better or go to therapy. They won't go to therapy. Um, and so he left. And when he left, he told me, he's like, well, I'm setting you free. And then he spent the next 6 years doing post-separation abuse, which is also very common. It's using the courts and legal. And so it was just frivolous motions all day long, stupid stuff. But you still have to go and show up. And this is a way for them to control you. And so does it get easier when you leave? In some ways, it does. In other ways, it's still very difficult. I say fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, but my ex-husband committed suicide 3 months ago. And so I finally feel free. And yes, it was tragic and horrible, but I have to look out for myself and my children. And it's like, okay, the abuse has stopped. And so my second husband, he went on a narcissistic rage. That you could do, if you could imagine like a almost 6'4" man throwing a 3 week temper tantrum, punching walls, slamming doors. It got very scary, and in that, and I'd never seen this before. And again, I didn't grow up in violence, and I, when his behavior changed, he literally looked like the Incredible Hulk. You know, when they Hulk like transitions, he looked like that, and it was terrifying. And I had six little boys, right? He had my three stepsons, and I have my three boys. And it was like, okay, how do we get out of here safely? Because this is scary. I don't want to be a part of this. I'm done. He was already on his second chance. And so it was done. And I got out of there. So that was, I think the rage was a buildup to the discard. Because the thing is that depending on what type of narcissist, my second husband was a victim narcissist. Like, well, he's an overt narcissist. So the complete opposite of a covert, malignant, self-proclaimed asshole. He hated everyone and everyone hated him. And I know it sounds weird. It's like, well, Stephany, how are you with such a horrible, negative person? And here I am. All I did all the time was clean up his messes. He would have a fight at the school and, you know, with kids' teachers, and I'd have to go clean up the mess because I'm diplomatic and an attorney, and he's just the shit show, making messes all over the place. And that's what we do as the victims. We're constantly making excuses for them, constantly cleaning up their mess all over the place. But doctors no longer would talk to him. Kids' parents would no longer talk to him. I mean, you see it all so much clearly when you're out of it, but when you're in it, and they tell you things like, I'm just having a bad day, I'm just super stressed out. And so it's like, okay, I mean, I get that because we're compassionate people, right? That's why we stay in these, because, well, if I can just love them a little bit more, they'll be nice and kind, and the first original person will show up. Well, that's a long gone. That's never happening. That original person is out.
I know
You're stuck with.
someone who is going through exactly what you went through, and she has been married twice, and she has someone that in the beginning it was fantastic, and after her first marriage ended, she felt quite broken. And comes along this man that's able to help her find all the pieces, like the Humpty Dumpty story, right? Put her all back
Mm-hmm.
together again and nursed her back to health. After a year or so, she found herself in a very similar situation of her first marriage, which ended poorly. It was just this one was on a whole nother level, as you mentioned. But there wasn't the physical threat or this person raging and rampaging like you described. But this person began to pull away. They treated them so well, like you mentioned, and then they slowly started to discard them. And they did it in
Mm-hmm.
a way that was a slow burn. First, they did it sexually, then they did it emotionally, then they did it mentally, and then they eventually did it verbally, where they ended up on two ends of the home. They were more like roommates versus being husband and wife. And I think many people, when they're dealing with these situations, they seem to forget that they don't have to accept what is happening. But because it's the only thing they've known for so long, they're like, okay, I'm comfortable in my filth, right? It's my filth. And my filth is probably better than being out there where because outside is scary. The people that you speak with, especially the women who I know by nature are probably more nurturing and more affectionate and things like that, right? Do they struggle with that sometimes, thinking that outside is worse because it's unknown versus they know this chaos and they've come to terms with it and they're comfortable with it, maybe?
You know, I think that would be on an individual basis. You know, so they say if you grew up in chaos, chaos is your comfort zone. And so they have these self-sabotaging behaviors to create drama, trauma, and chaos because that's where they're comfortable. And in fact, if you give them a steady, healthy relationship, they can't handle it because until they heal all those parts of them. And so for me, I grew up in a very healthy family. And so for me, no, I didn't want to stay, but it's how do you get out, and how many chances do you give a person, and can they change, and will they change? And um it's and so and then you have kids together, like I'm saying, and so it's like it just becomes so much more. But thankfully I learned, I got out quicker. I recognized the stuff more, and I was firmer when I said, you were on your second chance. Because my second husband, I actually filed for divorce. We were only married for 8 months. And it was 2020, and that's when his mask came off in 2020. 2020 was so confusing, right? Nobody knew what was going on in 2020. And so yeah, I got married in December 2019, and then all of a sudden 2020 hits, and his behavior changed. He I don't know whether he used that as the time to remove his mask because the world was crazy, so he just, well, and just be crazy too. And so I didn't know what was 2020, just being the crazy of 2020, and what was really his behavior. But I filed for divorce after 8 months of being married to him because I just recognized that something was off. I go back and read my journals, and it was like, there's Dr. Hyde, Mr. Jekyll personality. Like, I don't know what is happening. And that's the cognitive dissonance, right? That's the fog that they keep you in. And so when everyone else is becoming an alcoholic in 2020, I became sober. I'm like, I'm not even drinking because the gaslighting was so strong. I started being very detailed in my journals, and I stopped drinking because I'm like, he's messing with my brain here, my mind. But then, it's the love bomb. So we were separated for 2 months, and then his mom just kept calling me. Stephany, he loves you. He's changed. He'll do anything to be back with you. And please talk to him. Please drop all the stuff, and uh drop the divorce. He wants to be married to you. You guys, you're supposed to be married. Like, all this stuff. And this is what they will do to hoover you back because they don't want to be the ones that gets discarded. Because they've lost control, right? And it's about power and control. And so I finally, after 2 months, I was like, okay. And again, I was so confused because it's 2020. And so I agreed, and I told him the things. I'm like, well, you need to go to AA. You need to take an abuser recovery class. You need to do all these things. And I gave him a list of things to do. And he did those things, did them. Everything was online, remember. Again, it's 2020. How do you go to AA classes from your laptop? No. But his behavior was great for, I would say, 3 months. 3 months it was the idolization phase all over again. He was wonderful. He was perfect. And so then it's like, okay, well, maybe it was alcohol and 2020 that just made him crazy. But nope, after 3 months, the mask came off. He didn't learn anything from any of his courses. He started drinking. I started finding vodka bottles hidden in the garage and around the house, and he went back to his old ways. And so for me, it took another year and a half of trying to figure out when enough was enough.
I think that's
And
the
then,
big first step, right? And especially when there's addiction. Alcohol during that time, 2020, 2021, everyone was home. We couldn't be
yeah,
out. You were with the person that was causing you this harm. this entire time. So it probably felt much longer, much more serious, and much more impactful because you're confined to this person. And I think a lot of times abusers will show different stages of they'll show what they're capable of when it comes to the good. Then they'll take it away. Then they'll show it again. Then they'll take it away. But it's always dependent on the person who's being abused to say no more. And I think one of the dangers that a lot of people do is once they do find the courage, like you did, to step away and say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, many of them go back
Yeah.
to the
And
person, right?
yeah, and statistically, people will leave an abuser about 7 to 10 times before they actually leave for good. Because what I'm saying, they will hoover you back. They will love bomb you. They will send their friends, their family after you. And this is why, if you are going to leave, you have to go no contact. You have to cut them off and out of your life. That means you have to block them on all social media. You have to block them on your phone. In fact, go change your phone number, get a new phone. You have to cut their family off. You have to, because that is the only way where will get the message that you are not going to play this game anymore. And then you have to be strong, because it is like withdrawing from a drug addiction. So, when you're detoxing, you're essentially detoxing. You have to go cold turkey, and you need to have a support group of people who love and support you and will help you stay strong through it. Every day it gets better, just like when you're detoxing from a drug. Every day it gets easier, but then you have to do the hard work, because now you have been brainwashed. Remember, we were talking about the conditioning. They condition you to live from a place of reaction, to give emotional reactions. Maybe your self-esteem is fragile. You've been wounded. You believe all these lies that they've been telling you for so many years. So you have to really reprogram your brain and your mind. And this is why with so many people, they say, well, time heals, right? How many times have we heard that? Time heals. Just give it time and you'll feel better. Well, time heals in a healthy breakup. Time does not heal when you leave a disordered personality like narcissism, because they have changed your brain. They have reprogrammed you. They have put a virus in you, and you have to get that virus out.